right to it.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So just hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Saumil, for being here as our guest speaker. I know we had some scheduling stuff, so really appreciate your time and just, how willing you are to support veterans. And welcome all of the new community members. I think we've got a lot of people showing up here for the first time, so it's great to see. Veteran EK community is committed to veterans succeeding ETA through buying a business. We offer these tri-weekly recorded roundtable sessions, weekly newsletters with resources, and then just a community on the Slack page to kind of throw questions out and try to connect with folks. So it's been good to see people doing the introduce yourself and kind of making those common connections and helping each other out throughout the way. So real quick, since I'm a lawyer, none of this is legal advice. This is all educational. And then I'm just going to give kind of a quick intro on Saumil, and then we'll get right to it. So Saumil Jariwala is a search fund investor. He's the founder of Feta Fund, which is founder-focused entrepreneurship through acquisition. It's actually a really cool moment for me. I remember I was in law school, and this professor was like, "Have you heard of Feta Fund?" Like this guy, I was like anti-Mark Zuckerberg, no Facebook, and he was like, "You got to get on Twitter." And so I got on Twitter, and terrific content. I think I learned more from you than my MBA program. So it's really cool for me to be able to connect with you and have you be able to share your insights with this great group. So Saumil is a thought leader and a frequent speaker at top business schools and industry conferences on search funds and entrepreneurship through acquisition. Personal mission is to help 1,000 future CEOs acquire and operate small businesses. Before launching Feta Fund, Saumil worked as a search fund investor at Trilogy Search Partners, previously worked at Charles Bank, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm, and he began his career at Bain & Company as a consultant specializing in private equity due diligence. Saumil is a board member of Velux, I hope I'm saying that right, a medical device service roll-up, and previously was on the board of gastroenterology practice roll-up in two fast-growing SaaS companies. Saumil often speaks about search funds, like I said, at these really terrific conferences. Coming from Seattle with your wife and son, I know you're a Seattle Supersonics fan, big Ray Allen guy myself, so good stuff.
Really? I love that.
But yeah, thank you so much for being here, and floor is yours. Take it away.
Yeah, awesome. And I should have said there is kind of like one exception to that. If people want to get into sourcing, I do have some materials I've put together for that. But I guess what I should have said first is, and explain that better, is my learning from having talked to the vets group at Marshall on Friday is that probably the most valuable thing I could do to tailor this presentation is to ask you guys a couple questions first. It'll be really short, and then I'll jump straight into kind of talking about me and the fund and just kind of what Feta's unique point of view is on the space, given that, I and the fund invest across the search models, self-funded, traditional, and accelerator. Val, if it's all right with you, I might pick on you since I know you posted on LinkedIn today and clearly are following along in the space.
No problem at all.
About you've spent some time thinking about this world. I'm curious, as you think about where you are in your journey, like what your top one or two questions are, the kind of interesting inside scoop stuff that maybe you can't find in a podcast or in a book, that are like kind of pressing questions for you.
Well, for me personally, I think it's more so, it's a common question, but it's still a pressing question of, do I do traditional search versus self-funded search, right? And then maybe if there's a part B to that question would be, can I do self-funded search and eventually, transition, build that into becoming a larger entity, right? So yeah, so those would be the top pressing questions for me.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth there, but when people tell me that they want to start with a traditional search and then build something larger rather than I want to sell it or I want to become a search fund investor, there tends to be like a specific reason why. And I'm curious for you, like, what's that end state look like? When you say build something bigger, what's the reason for that? Like, what do you want to do with that bigger thing?
So for me, specifically, right, I think, I envision myself just building a conglomerate, right? So initially, let's say we're focused on manufacturing, right? And then we branch out and build and acquire other companies in other spaces. So the inspiration to that was just, I worked for an Indian conglomerate in Nairobi That's one. And also too,
Cool.
I saw a similar model, Vijay at the ETA summit, Montrose, right? They've acquired over 70 different types of environmental related like companies, right? Who Richard Perlman invested in. So that's my vision. And I guess my reason for that is just um, economic, the obvious economic reasons, really, but also B, really wanting to just really invest in entrepreneurs from a leadership perspective. Part of like what motivated me to get into the CTA space was really kind of juxtaposing my military experience to just the complexities and just the corporate sector. And what you see is leadership is really shit. People get rewarded based on just being administrative leaders and not leaders. So I think the ETA is a unique opportunity to invest in leaders in a way that could not only make them economically just better, but also just make them better leaders, right? And I tend to see the link between just small businesses and just the stability of societies. But anyway, that's another conversation. But yeah, those are my motivations.
Awesome. I do hope we'll circle back on that, because I think that
Yeah.
like the way I got into this space was doing pro bono small business consulting for just local small businesses in Philly back in 2011. And was trying to find a way to do that in a bigger way, build a career out of that, working with small companies. And I found out about Search in 2015. So thinking about search funds, not from the, I would say the average person who finds out about search funds and launches a search kind of starts thinking about this as like, how to be a CEO, or, like private equity, and then kind of going into the space. It's something else entirely when you start actually with the small business angle and then say, oh, wow, like this is an interesting way to realize that. So maybe we'll get back around to it. Mike, heard Val's point of view, trying to evaluate, hey, do I do traditional? Do I do self-funded? And then Mike, you're much further along that journey, right? Much more experience, have seen this a variety of ways, interning for folks, doing some stuff yourself. And so would love to hear, like, for you at this point of where you are in the journey, you're still coming to these things. And I suspect some of it is wanting to give back and mentor and kind of share others what you've seen. But like, what's what are your kind of top pressing questions at this point in time?
I would say that's a really good question. So something I thought about is I'm not sure if you remember, but I initially actually tried raising a traditional
Yeah.
search fund, and capital, I mean, obviously in the economic environment and the capital being more conservative, it was very difficult to raise as a non-standard, like down the fairway MBA. Even with my search partner, who's a civil engineer, master's, uh, we do actually want to raise a traditional fund in the future. I think post our first or second acquisition, our play is we are building a platform in the engineering space. What suggestions would you have? I would say kind of re-engaging investors that maybe weren't interested when you had less credibility, because it was never, oh, you can't do this. It's you're untested as an
Yes.
entrepreneur. So that's from that perspective. What would you say to that?
Yep. That's interesting. So it's interesting. I talked to both of you and got actually some questions around the traditional side of the journey. Are the reactions enabled here? Okay, it is. Can I just get a quick sense of people? And thank you for those on video. These are a lot more fun when I can see folks' faces. For those of you on video, can I just get a quick like raise your hand if the thing you're most interested in is talking about traditional? Can you use the reactions filter a feature, guys? Just so it's like can count a little easier. So it looks like that. Where on the top left, it'll say reactions. Okay. Okay. So maybe besides, I'm getting the sense besides Val and Mike, no one. What about the self-funded side? Cool. Okay. Got it. That's helpful. So that's neat. Kind of an interesting mix of folks then. I'll do my best to address all of the above. Thanks, Michael and Justice as well. I appreciate that. Okay, and then the last thing I'd love to do, same thing. If you want to raise your hand in the video, that's okay. Or if you want to use the reaction, that's great. Who here is in their 20s? Okay. Who here is in their 30s? Who here is in their 40s? Let's go, Nick. Okay. And is there anyone here who is not in one of those groups that age groups I mentioned? Okay. Okay, perfect. So that's another really fun thing about this. So I just want to play some things I heard back to you guys, and then I'll get into it. So often when I have conversations with vets, the interest skews predominantly towards self-funded. So, and that, that's fine. And of course, love talking about self-funded, but neat thing about what I do, and you don't tend to see a lot of in the search fund community is, I'm spread across all the models. My big belief about search is it's all about talent, and making high conviction bets and investments behind people you get to know and that you believe are talented, and then you put them in the seat, and then great things happen. And it turns out talent is model agnostic. Really talented people do the self-funded model, they do the traditional model and the accelerated model. So I spend my time across the different models, and so happy to opine on that. Often I talk to vets, and they're mainly focused on the self-funded side, but it's nice to again have some mix here. I heard a couple of other things I just want to put back towards you guys that make this group and groups of vets in general different than the average searcher I get to meet, at a conference or whatever. It's a wider age range, right? Most of the people, now maybe you saw this at the Wharton conference. For you guys who went to other conferences, maybe you've seen this, Harvard or MIT or Booth or whatever. The majority of the people there are between like 25 and 32. And what's really neat about getting to spend time with vets is the age range is wider. And that means you bring different perspective and a different point of view on what it means to be the operator of a small business. Generally, also, vets have experience managing people, and they're just very unlikely to show up into a business and have the kind of sticker shock effect that I often hear from your Harvard Business School person, right? Which is, oh my gosh, like, in order to get this group of people in this business I've bought really excited and motivated to like do their job and then some, I can't just send them an email telling them what to do, right? Like there's more winning hearts and minds that's necessary in order to like take this wonderful small business I bought and like take it to the next level, right? It's not just doubling pay or whatever, right? Like there's people there who they want to work, 30 hours a week, and to get them to work 42 or 44, it's a lot of work. And again, more complicated than just like, please add 6 hours a week, right? And for a lot of folks, they haven't had that type of experience in real life and kind of felt like what that might be like. And then the last thing I was going to say, and I alluded to this before, a lot of people come into this world, the kind of average searcher comes into it trying to do something like thinking about this kind of like it's private equity, or thinking about this because it's kind of like, I want to be a CEO of a company. For the vets I talk to, the interest level tends to be like broader across different angles, including thinking about this, having some kind of personal interest in building a holdco or like a conglomerate, kind of like a series of businesses that they can be owners. Sometimes they want to be active owners. Sometimes they want to eventually be passive owners. In addition to like maybe having some interest in being a leader of men and women, being a CEO, that type of work being intellectually stimulating. And so that's a lot more fun, just a lot wider interest in terms of how they're getting into this. Hopefully I'll circle back around in a few minutes, but the fact that a lot of search is trying to come up with your reason for buying a company, the reason you should own it, and not someone else, not a private equity firm, and critically these days, not another searcher. And so coming into this with a different point of view about why it's exciting and meaningful to you is actually like a big freaking deal when it comes to deciding what type of companies to buy, because it makes you unique, right? No one wants to be in the situation where you're bidding against 5 other searchers to buy a company. So the best way to do that is to have a different point of view on what's an attractive company, or what's exciting and interesting to you personally. Yeah. Why don't I stop there? I have a few more things I'd love to tell you guys about, winning as a self-funded searcher versus a traditional searcher, because we use the same terms, LOI, debt, purchase agreements, and, reps and warranties and financial models. But the terms of art are the same. The way you win, like what an example of a successful investment looks like, is really different between the traditional model and the self-funded model. Would love to talk about that. Again, could go through some of the materials I have around like how to build a sourcing machine. So these days I get a lot of questions about, okay, like I know I need to send 8,000 emails in, 2 years or whatever, but like what's actually in those emails? And how has it changed? Because, Google's really changed some of the ways that they send emails to spam based on all the changes to, with ChatGPT and the like. So some of that stuff. So there's a lot of different ways we could talk about this, but why don't I just kind of stop there? To summarize, I've kind of elaborated on my point of view across the different models. It's about talent, and then specifically how vets can have an angle that makes them, that gives them something, or like how being a vet can give you a specific angle to make you the logical owner, the rightful person to buy certain types of businesses. So I'll stop there for now. Charlie, why don't I kind of hand it off to you for what the right first question to answer is as we jump into this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting from the group. I think sourcing machine is good, and then maybe you can close with kind of ways that you've seen veterans kind of be able to maybe win out in some of these. I know it's a very competitive market, and then the other feedback that I got from some folks was, I hear money's easy to get. I hear investors are easy to get. Like, how do I even like get off go in that process? And I'm sure you'll get to some of that stuff, but just kind of the dynamics of engaging with investors. But I think the first one we got here is kind of sourcing and how to create a sourcing machine.
Absolutely. So why don't I just start here and share.
Yep, looks great.
Right. And let me see if I can remove the side panel here. That'll do. I think this will be okay. Can you guys see this all right?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay. So when it comes down to sourcing, right, let me just kind of lay out why this is important. Everyone knows the number of searchers is increasing. It used to be 10 years ago, or I guess, 9 years ago when I got into this, that there was a lot of education early on when you were reaching out to small business owners. Or if you were reaching out to brokers to buy from a broker and a small business owner that was using a broker. And you kind of had to answer this question, what's a searcher? These days, that question's a lot less common. And, the New York Times, Bloomberg, Fortune, several publications have covered search. And so it's gone from this like strange cottage industry to something that's Googleable. And it's covered by major publications. Today at Harvard Business School, the search fund class is the single most subscribed class out of any of the classes, right? It's like the one elective that gets the most people signing up for it, trying to take it. And you're seeing similar things at other business schools across the nation. So increasing amount of people interested in the model. And so then the logical question is, if I want to stand out, how do I do that? And for, there's two ways to find a business, right? One is by going the brokered route, and we could talk about that. The other is the proprietary route, sending out cold emails to small business owners and convincing them to sell, rather than, meeting them after the point they've made to sell and are using a broker to try and drum up interest and get someone to buy their business by paying the highest price. That's not really where you want to be. And so historically, you didn't see a ton of self-funded searchers doing the cold emailing thing, but it's increasingly the case as people see more searchers out in the market and want to find a unique way to win. And really, when it comes down to sourcing, it's about three things. Do I focus on the quantity or the quality of opportunities? Is this a numbers game, or am I trying to really work these leads in a relational way? The second thing is, how many emails should I send? And the third is what exactly do I email these people? I'll skip through this here. I think the like quick thing I would basically say is a lot of search, even though it's increasingly more mature, it's not solved. So I want to say here, I'm going to give you some examples of stuff that has worked for people based on the searchers I've worked with. But we're not at a point in time yet where there's like a specific playbook. People are still figuring this out. So treat this as an informed opinion from somebody that's been doing this a little bit of a while and had the chance to work with over 60 searchers since 2016. We just got into this before, but like, what do the best searchers do? To win, you have to stand out. That's really it. As there are more and more searchers in the market, you don't want to win by paying the highest price. The way you're going to want to win is by standing out. And the thing that you have that's most unique about you is your personal style and your personal story, right? And being a vet is a part of that, not all of it. Where you grew up, your hobbies, your specific work experience, the stories you have about, formative moments in your life, formative professional work experience moments of your life, things from your kind of things from the last 10 or 20 years, stories you can use to build a narrative about who you are. And the hope is that you can use that stuff to convince the seller to say, hey, Mike is bid on this company. It's a couple $1,000,000 or a couple $100,000 less than this other offer, but I want to go with him. And, after I sell him my company, I want to spend time with him. Like, I want to help transition it. I'm not going to take the money and go straight to Bali. I want to like help transition this, maybe even be a mentor over the long run. Hey, Mike calls me a year or two in, I no longer have any stake in the business, but he's a good guy and he's running this company that I built and I want to be helpful to him. You can see how having a seller be excited about you and your personal story, you as a person, more than just someone with the big checkbook, can help you not only in terms of buying at a cheaper price, but actually in that period that goes well beyond after you buy the company. So I think that's the key thing here. It's about standing out. And a lot of that is your personal style and your personal story. So how does a seller figure out about your personal style and personal story? It's three things. One is when they meet you face-to-face on a Zoom. But the problem is that's really hard to get them to do. Even if you're doing a broker process, right? Most brokers don't want to get you in front of the seller until pretty late in the game. So the other two ways are your website, which is kind of beyond the scope of this discussion today. And if you're a self-funded searcher and don't have a website, please take 15 minutes to put one up. I like recorded some videos of me putting together a website in 11 minutes. So you've got no excuse, less than $50 in 11 minutes, you can get a website up. So if you're a self-funded searcher, please have one. It's important because it's one of the two easy ways you have for a seller to know who you are, what's important to you. So one's the website, and then the second is your cold email copy. Two ways about it. One is, so how do you focus? So we talked about those three questions. The first one is, do you focus on quantity or do you focus on quality? I actually just might skip this here because I think we have another 20 minutes. Is that right? Charlie?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, 8:15.
Okay. In that case, I'll skip this and go straight to the copy. And you guys will like this. It's actually from a pair of vets who really crushed it in terms of outreach, and we'll talk about that. I'll skip question one. I think what you should know is there's several ways. There's two kind of broad theories about how to do this. One is sending tons of emails. One of the large search fund investors, Peterson, recommends 400 emails a week. And it's all about just like churning through leads and hoping you catch someone, a couple weeks before they pick a broker. That's the quantity approach. And then the other approach is quality, where you kind of find a couple of high potential targets, people you think might sell, and you work those leads for weeks or months or years in some cases. Key thing here is if you're going to do the quantity thing, send tons of cold emails. The best searchers are generally doing about 400 a week. It's a lot easier to do if you're a traditional searcher and have other people's money to spend on that. But for those of you going to do the self-funded thing, you should know like that's kind of the target. But let's go talk about what you actually email these people. So this is from a pair of military officers, former military officers, and they were searching. And this was their copy, so I'll just read it out. Subject: Vetrepreneur intro, company name. Then seller name is the intro. I'm hoping to connect with you as my partner, blank, and I are looking to partner with a thriving organization providing, outsourced accounting services. We are former military officers with backing to acquire, lead, and grow one great, impactful business with over $1 million in net income. I imagine you probably receive a lot of outreach, but I'd love an opportunity to connect and learn more about you and your company. Explain why we are different from other buyers and see if there's a fit. Are you available to connect this week or next? And this email got north of a 40% response rate, which is considered quite good. These days, those numbers have gotten a little bit lower. But when they did this campaign, if you were getting 40% consistently, that was kind of like top quartile, top 25%. And I'd love for you guys to just take a minute here, and would love to just hear some thoughts. Can either, if you're off video, feel free to put it in the chat, or if you're on video, would love to kind of hear you guys say it out loud. Can I just get 2 or 3 different reasons from you guys on why you think this was such successful email copy? Email copy. Yeah, exactly.
It's authentic.
Okay, it's authentic. That's a great one. What else?
It's different and implies trust already. Military people usually are more trustworthy, people think.
Sure. It's unique. Highlighting their backgrounds as vets already builds this kind of parasocial relationship where the seller feels like maybe they can trust them. And that's several reasons, right? Like someone who decides to serve says a lot about their personal responsibility, says a lot about their desire to, that they care about serving others, right? A lot of business owners are conservative leaning and very patriotic, so show some kind of shared appreciation for our country. What are some other things? What about the specific copy, not just the kind of messaging in the narrative? What are some things in here? And look, there are some wrong answers, but feel free to just throw whatever you want out there, and I'm happy to build off what you guys give me.
So it's definitely the fact that they say we're looking with backing to acquire. So I worry about, as a self-funded searcher, you can't really say that, right? One of the questions that we pose, that I pose to you, is like the biggest barrier I always find with broker deals is the dreaded proof of funds question.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the nice things about the proprietary search thing. The idea is to capture someone before they have that gatekeeper in front of them. Because not only do you get a cheaper price, but if winning as a searcher is about having someone have personal buy-in to you, and then that rapport and relationship is what carries you through this very disruptive process of having a person give you, their personal income tax returns and every piece of data they've ever had about their company, and spent 15 hours exporting QuickBooks and reformatting it, right? That's a lot of effort and time. Someone's a lot more likely to do that if they like you, as opposed to just the promise of $2 million down the road when, it's so much easier to just run their company another year. So yeah, it's part of the beauty of the proprietary search is you capture someone before there's that broker. And we all know here, brokers are pretty unfriendly to searchers in general, and especially self-funded searchers. Before I forget, and I'm so sorry, you've gone off video. What was the name of the, what's your name? The person, yeah, Dan, right?
Curious, what have you heard of the Exit Planning Institute, and what do you think of these certified exit planners? They're usually wealth managers.
Yeah, it's pretty bogus. There's been a lot of folks over the last 12 months who are essentially real estate brokers, and it's such a terrible time in the real estate market that they're I know how to sell a house. Can't be that much harder than selling a small business. And they're out there trying to get a bunch of credentials and pretend those things are the same, and they are really not the same. So if you're talking about folks who are brokers and calling themselves certified exit planners, if you meant something else, though, happy
no,
to
there's literally a thing called the Exit Planning Institute. I've gone to some of their meetups. Some places they have, here in Boston, they're free, but I ran into a guy that He has his own family office. He's acquired and sold businesses. There's some guys that are like high net worth wealth managers. Uh, so it's like, I think it's a good source for intermediaries, like non-brokers.
Interesting. By the way, Dan, to answer your previous question, easiest thing I would do, find a couple of high net worth individuals that like you and could theoretically be investors in your deal. Get them to write you a letter of support. It's not exactly what the broker wants, but it'll get you a lot closer. And they can make it clear in that letter of support it's non-binding, but that you've talked to them and they're open to evaluating whatever you bring to them. So that can actually go a long way. Any other kind of last thoughts here? Because I don't want to run out of time. On what makes this copy good?
The email's it's efficient, it's brief, right? It's like he leads with, this is who I am and this is what I'm looking to accomplish, right? I imagine owners get emails all the time, right? So just thinking about how to be efficient with every word is important. This is almost Minto, right? Like yeah, it's a consulting term, but yeah.
You read my mind. And that's actually really important. There's since this is recorded, I won't mention who, but there's a well-known accelerator type investor out there that did a bunch of A/B testing on this, and what they found was that 4 sentences is the optimal length in order to get somebody to respond to your email. There's longer thoughts about that, and people who are quality optimizing as opposed to just sending out 400 emails a week, they'll play around with that a little bit, but like 4 sentences, that's kind of what you got to work with. The longer it goes, less likely people are to respond because they're not going to get all the way to the end. And what I love about this email is when you really think about what they're saying this is who I am, or I guess I want to talk to you. This is who I am. I want to buy your company. You see right here, explain why we are different from other buyers. So they're making it clear that they want to buy their company. And then lastly is, can we chat on Thursday? Talk about to the point, right? Like, this is who I am, or let's chat. This is who I am. I want to buy your business. Can you chat? Right? Like, super to the point. And generally, I think when folks are first going down this path, if they don't, they often end up with copy that's too long. Again, there can be some benefits or unique reasons you might do that, but generally the rule is short is really good. It's short. The email objective is clear. And the third sentence, they say, we're going to buy your business. It ends with a strongly worded and specific call to action. It just says, can you connect this week? Not, I know you're really busy, but if you have some time in the next few weeks, can we maybe see about having a call? Like, super wishy-washy. You want to just tell people, I want to talk to you. My favorite is, can you chat on Thursday? That one actually is so direct, or can you chat or let's chat Thursday at 2 p.m. Not even framing it as a question. That one can be so direct, it can come off as a little rude. So you got to be careful. But really, like, there's no, circling around the issue. It's just right to the point. And that's important because if somebody's skimming through your email, you want it to be extremely clear why they're talking to you, right? Why they should talk to you, because you want to buy their business. The downside with this is there's no customization, right? There really isn't anything in here about this person's values. And, public service is important to me, or, something I've learned from my time in the Army is that, like, I love leading teams of 20 people, or, I'm really excited about buying your radiation dosimetry services business because I was the chief dosimetry officer on a naval submarine. And like, I understand how important it is to get that stuff right. You can see why a sentence on that might help give the seller a chance to like start to understand what your values are, what's important to you, and start to build that rapport so that, again, you stand out. So that's kind of where I'll leave it. I'm happy to send this copy to this group afterwards. Charlie, maybe you can send along. But that's, I think, the short of it, right? If you're gonna do the proprietary search thing, one common way to do that, all about volume. Keep it short. Don't be afraid to have a clear call to action, and that's how the magic happens.
Terrific. And then just real quick, as far as engaging with investors, when I know this is a question I got from a bunch of people, is like when, and I've heard you speak on podcasts that, you know, makes sense. A lot of people you invest with, you have these longer relationships with. It's a long process. So I don't know if you could just give like a quick 5 minutes on how to think about that as you're navigating the search process that obviously, like you focused on, a lot of it is deal sourcing, but when you need your investors, you need them. And so how do you prepare for that?
And does it make sense to talk about it kind of from Mike's angle of like, why is it so tough in the market? Or like, what are some reasons it's so tough in the market? And like, what can you do to position yourself for success? Or is there a different angle you'd like to talk about?
That's great. Yeah.
Okay. And Mike, I was really glad you mentioned that, because it's a good reminder that it's one of those things that investors feel acutely, but we don't always get a good space to actually talk about it, right? It's a more advanced question than the like, let me explain why you should become CEO of a small business. And what I would say is this: when I first learned about search in 2015, the way you raised a search fund was by cold emailing a bunch of really rich people who had invested in search funds before. And one of them might decide to actually open your email, and they would say, great to meet you. Like, I don't want to talk to you or invest in your search unless I get to know you. Let's go play golf. And then you do that. And then at the end of that golf outing, they liked you and they believe in you and your story. And they said, I'm going to open my Rolodex to the like other 20 people I know who are search fund investors. And if I didn't open my Rolodex to you, there's no way they would invest. But because I've gotten to know you, you know, I can like make it so that happens, and like impress them, or you're screwed and you're never going to raise a search fund. And like today, and to do that was like unbelievably difficult, right? To like to convince these investors to give you their money was very, very difficult. And so what that meant was people who ended up raising a search fund or making the commitment to do a search, they were all like anyone who went down that path, it was selecting for a group of people who were willing to do something very like deeply grueling and challenging. And I think the problem today is part of the reason why there are more searchers is because the friction to make the decision to launch a search has come down a lot, right? These days, it's you buy a $12 domain on GoDaddy, pick something that sounds like a private equity fund, and you use a CRM. Streak is free, and then you download the SBA.gov PPP loan database, and then use a free database tool to extract the name of every company in there, and then Bob's your uncle, right? Like try to find the email addresses and go nuts, and you can call yourself a searcher. And so it's created this problem in the market where if you're an investor, or I should say for a lot of the investors these days, it's really hard to filter out who is really committed to this model. Someone who, just like the people 10 years ago, is committed to how grueling and challenging and dedicated this process is, from those who aren't. And the collateral damage from that has been searchers who didn't go through business school or like weren't on those kind of target schools that have done search fund stuff forever. And so as a result, search fund investors didn't get the chance to meet them 18 months before they raised a search. Or searchers who have backgrounds that look different than backgrounds of other searchers that investors have backed before. Or, the way they interview, they talk about their experience differently, or they explain why they want to do this differently than, the however many 100-something searchers that investors has backed previously. It's increasingly, as there are more and more searchers out there that are raising, that are interested in the model, many investors, not everyone, many investors have kind of gotten maybe like a little complacent or intellectually lazy on trying to figure out who's great, and are just kind of going back to old pattern recognition, or prioritizing people that kind of look like other searchers they've backed. And so I think that's the real challenge. And solving that issue is tricky, but what I will say is getting to know investors early and just generally showing that you're someone who, I'll give an example. There's a woman who's raising a search fund right now, and she's kind of it's taken her a month or two to kind of start getting through that process, and she's had some commitments, but not a ton. She sends out this newsletter like every week and a half or 2 weeks, just saying like what she's doing, business owners she's talking to, conferences she's going to, and these really nicely written MailChimp newsletters, right? Like thoughtfully done. It's clear she's putting time on it, and I love that, right? Because that's exactly the type of activity and bias to action that you see from the best searchers, right? And 10 years ago, anyone who could raise a search fund, like the only way they were going to make it through that process is if they have that bias to action. Because boy, it is hard to get some of these super rich people who, were the only people who used to invest in searches back in the day to like actually return your email. So, behavior like that goes a really long way to making folks comfortable. So it just something to think about, like ways you can demonstrate that you are, have that bias to action and are willing to put in the consistent work to do kind of this grinding and grueling thing can materially improve your chances of actually raising your fund. In addition to trying to get to know people really early. So.
Great. Yeah, and is that much different as far as obviously the bias to action is important, but like when you're thinking about, and just going off of a question in the chat, with the the traditional model versus self-funded, because obviously that kind of investor injection looks a little differently. Obviously it's a totally different model of how you think about your investors, but I don't know, if that really, do you think that as someone that kind of uniquely does both, do you think that really changes the way that you initially think about investors, or do you recommend self-funded guys and gals to kind of think about investors, post LOI or kind of at a later stage?
Yeah, so the self-funded problems are totally different. It's been a while since I've come across a self-funded deal that didn't get funded. And part of the reason, so the average terms right now, 2x liquidation preference, and then searcher keeps 80% of the common. I sometimes see 90% of the common. Sometimes, if the searcher is struggling to get the deal funded, you might see 60%, 50 something percent of the common, but still pretty much everyone's maintaining control. There's a ton of interest. If you are raising, you should absolutely be on Twitter. I know it feels scary to take the plunge and go from lurking to actually writing some content and posting. If you're someone who's on these platforms, people kind of see your posting, and maybe you write something that gets 1,000 impressions and someone retweets it who's got a larger following, you'll be surprised how quickly the money will come in. So that's really the big thing. Generally, SMB Twitter is a great place to learn about this, and posting on there is a really good way to get people to offer to write you a check. Mike's point in the comment is definitely 100% true. Tons of networking necessary. And of course, if you're already a successful CEO, it's a lot easier because people then understand the demands and challenges of that job. You're not going to be surprised when they buy the company. Most self-funded searchers do a bad job of trying to find their investors before they have a deal. While, of course, I would encourage people to try and build those relationships with investors in advance of having the deal, I'll, of course, say, I get it, right? Like, the hardest thing is finding the company. And so it's natural to want to deprioritize something that's important but less urgent than getting out there and finding something to put a bid on. So I've got a lot of empathy and understanding and appreciation for why that doesn't happen more. But it is critical, like maybe essential, to meet investors early, if at all possible, for traditional. It's kind of a nice to have first for self-funded.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. And so I think we're a few minutes past 8:15. So thank you so much for your time, Saumil. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts you want to leave with, or I'll leave it to you.
I can't stress enough how important it is to take the time to really think about what your narrative and story and angle is. It's 100% important for traditional. It's still really important for self-funded to get past those gatekeepers and to convince the seller to put the time necessary to like actually give you the stuff you need to buy their business. And people hand wave through it in the process of trying to figure out everything else. So, find the time, spend a couple hours over a couple of weeks, write it down, and make sure it's something that you can convincingly deliver to brokers and sellers and small business owners and to investors at conferences. It's time well spent.
Perfect.